Okay, everyone. So in this next little section, I wanted to review a little bit about how our arrays.sorting can be modified by using this comparator concept. So as a little quick review, the comparable interface is this interface that has one method called public int compare to, and it's going to compare it to any type of object that's references the object parameter. Now, if we use this method, it's going to return a negative integer, so either -1 to -infinity, if the calling object, so if the object, for instance, if we are using a.compare to b, if a is less than the b argument, then it's going to be a negative number. If a and b are equal, then it's going to have a value of 0. And if a is greater than b, then it is going to be a positive number. Now, as a reminder, the string, double, and integer all implement this compare to method, and so because they implement this method, they're considered to implement the comparable interface. Now, when we implement this interface, we're going to be using this public interface comparable of t, and that means that that's going to have our header, and if that's inside of our header, we're going to be forced to use this compare to method. Now, as a little note here, it says that the arrays.sort method is defined to use the compare to method unless you specify otherwise. Now, what does this actually mean for us? Well, why don't we go ahead and let's comment a few of these things here. And when I go ahead and try to make a new array here, let's just make a new array of strings called people. We'll see here that I have a few people here. Let me kind of add another one. Let's add a rows right here. And what I want to do is I'm going to sort my array of people. Now, what I'm going to do after this is try to print out the people array. And again, if we print it out normally, we're going to be having an issue where we just have it print out the memory address of it. So what I want to do is say arrays.toString of people. And if I run this one, we'll see here that I get the lexographical sort or alphabetical sorting of Duchess, Dylan, Jack, Rose, and Sophia. So again, Rose is moved over to where Jack is, and Jack is moved to where Dylan is, and Dylan's moved to where Rose is. So it organize it in alphabetical order. And now, well, what if we don't want to organize it by alphabetical order? What if you're implementing a program where you have to organize your strings by an ordering of how long they are? This is where we can implement this comparable interface. So I'm actually going to go ahead and show us one way that we can do this is by creating a new class that implements this interface. And the notes go out over this a little bit. We're going to use this comparator interface, and we are going to try to get the lengths of the strings rather than the graphical ordering or alphabetical ordering of our strings. Now, again, the issue is here is that the string class, as we're already using it, can only be used in one way, and it's already using a compare to, which uses the lexicographical ordering, so you can't use multiple of them. So what we're going to do here is take a look at the second version of arrays.sort, where we have a few more parameters. And what do we mean by a second version of it? Let me comment this out really quick and let's just try this out. We'll see here that down here, we get this kind of complicated looking sorting method where it says sort of a T array. And we're going to take in for the second argument is this comparator. So we're going to take in an array to sort and then a comparator, or what we're going to use to compare these arguments. So what we could say here now is not only are we going to provide this type of people array that we already used, but we're also going to provide a comparator that we're going to reference by creating our own one here. So how do I actually make my own comparator for my arrays.sort to use? Well, we're going to need to make a class. I'm going to call this string length comparison. Length comparison. And the issue here is that we need to also import our comparator class. And if we want to use the compare to method, we have to type in implements comparator. And what it's going to use as a issue here, if we hover over this, it says incorrect number of arguments for comparator t. It cannot be parameterized with arguments that are blanks. So we're going to say, what do I want to compare? I'm going to be comparing strings. So now what happens if I was comparing doubles? Double like so. What about integers? Integer and so forth. For the time being, we're doing strings, which is fine. And now what we're going to try to do public class string length comp, and we'll see here that if I implemented this comparator interface, I have to implement the methods that are a part of it. And that's the entire reason that we're using comparators in general, right? We want to make sure that we have these strings running for us properly. Now, to test out how this actually works in our code, I'm going to write out inside the compare method of string length comp, like so. And now what we said earlier is that if we use Arrays.sort, it's sorting things lexicographically or in alphabetical order. The other way that we could sort is by using this type of new sorting mechanism, like so, that takes in an array and a parameter that is the comparator. So how do I actually reference this comparator in my code? Well, I could say something like people, and then I'll need to create a new object of string length comp. So the way that I can do this here is by first of all calling it, I commented out down there, but we can recall it here. We're going to say make a comparator called, I'm going to call this string comp and set it equal to new string length comparator. Now this string comp laid out in this format right here is going to be what I provide as the second argument into my Arrays.sort. And you might notice now that it's actually running just fine. So let's try to print out what happens here when I use this method. And if I run it, we'll notice that I actually get inside the compare method of string length comp repeatedly because I just put it right here. Now an issue here is that I'm returning 0. So what happens with my code of my array? It stays the exact same. And why is it staying the exact same? Well, again, what did we say about the Arrays.sort method? That it's going to return negative if the calling object is less, 0 if they are equal, and positive if otherwise. And what happens is because this is returning 0 nonstop, what happens here is that nothing changes. Everything is equal in the eyes of this comparison method. So why are we doing this? You can make any type of comparison method you would want, and you can get really creative with them. For our purposes here, we have two strings that were brought in. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say return o1.length minus o2.length. And what this will do is that it's going to compare each of these each of these strings in this array against each other to this method down here. And it's going to organize it this way. So what I'm going to do now is try to find the length and see how things are going to be organized from top to bottom. Now, if we run this one here, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to comment out this method right here. If I run this one, we'll now see that we get Jack, Rose, Dylan, Sophie, and Duchess in increasing order here. So the first one is lexicographical sorting, so we get it in alphabetical order. The second one is where we can get it into an order of from least amount of string elements to most amount of string elements. Let's try to get a little creative here. I'm going to create a new class, and what I'm going to call this is string length comp alt. I'm going to call it like an alternative one. And what do we need to do? We need to say that this implements comparable, and it's going to take in a class of a string for this comparable. And now I need to add in my unimplemented methods. And what do I want this one to do? I want to return it the length of the second element, o2.length minus o1.length. And we'll see here, oops, I used comparable instead of comparator there. Sorry about that. So I'm going to implement this comparator interface, and we'll notice here that I'm getting this new error that says import comparator cannot be resolved to a type. So I'm going to import this comparator up here, like so. And now my public class right here is going to need to implement this unimplemented methods. And you'll notice that this is comparing is different to the compare to that we used to use. Compare is going to take in two objects to compare each other. And now what I'm going to do is return o2.length minus o1.length, like so. And if I try to go ahead and create another version of this comparator, so what I'm going to say, comparator string comp alt is equal to new string length comp alt, like so. Very similar to that we just made. What am I going to try to do? I'm going to try to sort my array of people using this comparator I just made. And if I print this guy out now, we'll see that the first one gives me lexicographical, second one gives me least to greatest amount of items in the string, last gives me greatest to least amount of items in the string. And you'll notice here that Jack and Rose are kind of at a tie, and you could see here that it kind of converts to previous ways of ordering if that's the case. So again, this is kind of the comparator class. What I did right there is how you're going to create it. So if you're asked to implement overriding the Arrays.sort method in either descending or ascending order, that's one way that you could do it. You could definitely do it in any other way that you'd like as well. You can get very creative with it. And please make sure to review this for the upcoming homework assignment. There's going to be asked to mimic a bit of this functionality there. So again, please take a look at the string length comp alt will be in there, and the compare method. Go ahead and uncomment the these down here as well, just to see what happens and see how this operates too.